Of the South Kingstown Town Council. It is Monday, December 9th. The time is 7:31. We're going to begin our regular session. Our first order of business is the pledge to the flag. Please rise and join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And will the clerk please take the roll?
Council President Collins.
Here.
Council Vice President DeCruz.
Here.
Councilwoman Kelso.
Here.
Councilman Veely.
Here.
Councilman McEntee.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. Item 4 is the approval of minutes of previous meetings.
I'll make a motion to approve 4A and B.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries as well. At this point, I just want to make a note that as we get later into the agenda, 13F, I think maybe a number of folks came here for this item. That is a new business item. It's just an order of notice, which is something that we regularly pass on a consent agenda that gives the administration the ability to let people know that we're going to be having a public hearing. I think the public hearing is what a lot of folks want to come here and give us their opinions on. That's going to be January 13th. You are, of course, welcome to stand up at our opportunity for public comment in the middle of the meeting and give your opinions on this issue. But if you really want to make your voices heard on that issue, definitely come to the January 13th meeting. If you can't make it to that, please do send letters that we can enter into the record.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just one note for the council, because I don't want to forget about it, and I did not discuss it during the pre-session. F should be amended in a very slight way. I was talking to Terry Murphy earlier this evening, and there is a semicolon after land swap about halfway down that paragraph. That semicolon should be removed, and the words further authorizing should be stricken and replaced with possible submission. And the purpose of this amendment is to clarify that the purpose of the hearing on the 13th is to hear from the public about the possible submission, not the land swap itself. It's the possible submission of the application.
Okay, when we get to item 13F, we'll consider that amendment. All right, that brings us back to licenses. Item 6B, is a resolution granting a victualling license to Noodle Soup, Inc. of 99 Fortin Road, subject to issuance of a retail sales tax permit application by Zhang Dongzhu, President, 30 Lower College Road. Please come up to the podium and state your name for the record.
Joe Jondong, so approved for my restaurant license.
Yes, welcome. So tell us a little bit about the business and hours, type of food.
We close Sunday, so 11 to 10, that's it.
Okay. Other questions?
What are some of your menu items going to be?
Only sell on the soup,
The soup?
soup only.
Oh, okay.
With noodles in it, I'm guessing. Sounds good. College kids love that stuff. All right, do I hear a motion?
Make a motion to approve agenda item 6B.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. Good luck.
Good luck.
6C is a resolution granting a miscellaneous permit to conduct the Matunic Angry Unicorn Half Marathon 5K road race on Sunday, May 3rd. Oh, is this the one where the representative for this item could not be here? I think it's up to us whether we want to continue it or we can pass it. I'll leave it.
I'd like to continue it if possible. I mean, they haven't, it's May 3rd, right?
Yeah,
We
plenty
have
of time.
plenty of time.
All right.
Second.
Motion to continue to the next meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. 6, is that the end of 6? On to item 7, public hearings. 7A is proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance, Article 6, overlay zones, special zones, and special management districts. Section 608, Coastal Community Overlay District. Section 608.9, General Standards for Changes to Coastal Community Structures. The following standards shall apply to all changes to coastal leased land community structures. Expansion to existing structures or replacement structures that are currently less than 15 feet, that's the change language, must maintain or increase the existing separation between structures.
Evening, councilors. If you recall, back in September, we received correspondence from the chairman of the zoning board, Richard Jerzak. He expressed concern with some existing language of the ordinance, of our existing coastal community overlay district ordinance, that effectively prevented the expansion of structures horizontally, let's say. So on this one slide, you can see that the item A under existing standard is the language, the subject language of concern. And you notice under B, there's a statement that says, where possible, replacement structures shall provide a minimum separation of 15 feet. There's no reference to a distance in the top one, which basically essentially prevents someone, regardless of how much side yard they had, to expand in that direction. So using the intent of that section, the planning staff, the planning board, and the town solicitor's office worked to simply add those letters that are in underline that reads expansion to existing structures or replacement structures that are currently less than 15 feet must maintain or increase the existing separation between structures. We feel that that simple change corrects the problem and alleviates many of the issues that the zoning board is experiencing.
Seems like a good, simple change. Any questions from council members?
I just feel like there's a couple of words missing. So in the proposed language that says replacement structures that are currently less than 15 feet, I think we're missing a couple of words, no? Is it me reading something strange? The structures themselves aren't 15 feet. They're 15 feet from existing structures, right? So this to me reads like the current structures are 15 feet. Not, I think there's a couple of words missing is what I think, but that's up to everybody else.
Yeah, as you know, as we had read it, it kind of picks up on it at the end of the sentence, where it says that are currently less than 15 feet must maintain or increase the existing separation between structures. But I can see your point. This was
right. The existing structures. This speaks to existing structures being 15 feet. 15 feet what? Right? Wide, tall. I do think there's a couple of words missing.
So in B, it talks about 15 feet from other existing structures. So that's what we're talking about.
I understand what you're talking
about. No. So maybe we just take that language and say that are currently less than 15 feet from other existing structures must maintain or increase the existing.
Right. And that amendment would not cause this to happen.
No, that's not a substantive, no. So if you want to just insert after 15 feet from other existing structures, Deb, I think that would do just what you're looking for.
Any other questions?
What were some of the issues that were being experienced by the zoning board that we are remedying by proposing this change?
Well, I think it was improvements and renovations to existing structures. They were not able to grant any relief from this section when applications were coming in and proposing any sort of lateral expansion out to the sides, because the existing standard says that they have to maintain or increase their separation, which means if they were to go side to side, they were not allowed to, even if they had enough room.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions or comments from the council, it is a public hearing. If there's comments from the community, again, just limited to this particular issue, please come forward now and make them known. You have something to add?
Before you close the public hearing, I do want you to acknowledge there is correspondence from the planning board to the council dated October 25th regarding findings of fact, consistency with the comprehensive community plan, and findings of fact and consistency with purposes of zoning. I just want that to be part of your record.
Thank you. All right, I did not see anybody jumping up from their seats on this item, so I would entertain a motion to close the
I'll
public.
make a motion that we close public hearing 7A.
Second.
So moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And Deb, did you want to make that motion?
You could simply state that you approve public hearing item A and you adopt as your own the findings of fact, consistency with the comprehensive community plan and the purposes of zoning as set forth in the October 25th correspondence from the planning board.
As well as the
As
amendment.
well as
Approve as
the
amended.
wording.
I'm sorry, good point. Approve as amended.
So we'll make that motion.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. And that brings us to 7B, public hearing to consider proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance, Article 3, use regulations, Article 5, supplementary regulations, Article 12, definitions, and Appendix A, use code descriptions relative to mobile food establishments, as shown on Exhibit 1 of the agenda.
So in 2018, the state enacted the State Mobile Food Establishment Regulation Act, which required municipalities to permit mobile food establishments in accordance with that act. That created a standardized process for the registration of food trucks and carts that sell food or beverages and alleviates the need for food trucks to navigate many times a difficult regulatory process with each individual municipality. That act allowed municipalities to regulate location, however, also hours of operation, noise. It can require the vendor to obtain an event permit and can deny, suspend, or revoke a permit if the vendor's operation violates town land use regulations, zoning, or other ordinances. In discussion with the Solicitor's Office and with the Planning Board from March until October, I believe, it was discussed considerably, and we agreed to, or we had the idea of splitting up the ordinance into two components. One, a section of the ordinance that would be covered by the general code for operation in public rights of way, and a second component which would be on private property subject to zoning regulations. I just want to bring it to your attention now before I get into this. There's some minor amendments that I've provided in the copy to you that went to your packets. They're very minor housekeeping items. They weren't advertised, but at the culmination of this, I'll describe and tell you exactly what they are. They're fairly minor. So with that, we propose this section 511 of the zoning ordinance for mobile food establishments. The first thing that we incorporated was use descriptions for two separate uses. The mobile food establishment itself, which is your typical food truck, with an exclusion for trucks that remain stationary for less than 15 minutes, i.e. your ice cream trucks, so they're not considered under the same rules regulation. We also provided a description or definition for mobile food court, which is more than one mobile food establishment at a location. And we modified the definition of farm events to allow for mobile food establishment to be a allowed category use for farms. The second component of the amendment included establishing allowances in the use regulations. We added use code 56.4 to the table of use regulations, which prohibits the use of mobile food establishments in residential zones unless it's performing a catering function. So if it's if you hire one for a birthday party, or you want the super duper weenie truck for your child's birthday, it's allowed, certain prescriptions. And we also stipulates that the use is allowed by right in commercial and industrial zones. And again, I think it's important to remember that this is on private property, not necessarily in the public right of way. So the provision for not allowing it in residential zones was obviously to keep the type of commercial use that could get permanently established in a residentially zoned area.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Allowed or allowed to operate? So if someone owns a mobile food truck, are they allowed to park it in their residential zone? This to me doesn't allow for that. That allows, allowed to operate, I understand.
Correct.
Allowed to vend from, but this is not excluding people from keeping a mobile food truck on their property.
So if
Not operating.
If I may, I think that the interpretation there would go to the use. And parking of a commercial vehicle as an ancillary use to a residential use is permitted. So you can park your vehicle
Okay.
there. You just can't conduct business there now. That's the current. It turns on the use. If you're parking it as ancillary to your residential use, it's fine. If you're parking it so that you can operate a business, it's not.
Right. I'm just concerned that this takes away the right to park it there, to store it there.
No, it speaks to the use again.
Okay. All right.
In addition to that, we've established the use code 56.5, mobile food court. Those are allowed in commercial and industrial zones via special use permit. Moving on, the specific requirements for operation in residential zones, again, is generally prohibited unless in connection with a private event or gathering. It's not open to the general public, and it's limited to 2 times a year. It's allowed on farms as an accessory farm event pursuant to Section 503(7)G, and the hours of operation were limited from 11:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. However, relief would be available from this via special use permit if it didn't meet the needs of the homeowner.
Okay. And are the hours of operation consistent with the state regulations, or is this specific to South Kingstown?
I do not believe there are any state hours of operations stipulated by the state.
The rationale for 11:30? Not 8:30 a.m.?
It was the happy medium that we kind of the planning board came to consensus with, that if a homeowner wanted to have a party on a Sunday, that it didn't happen too early and that it didn't extend too late. I think that the belief with the discussions with the planning board was that the demand would be for the afternoon hours into the evening and not necessarily in the morning, and to protect neighboring homeowners from any noise or operation from a early morning party. In non-residential zones, the commercial and industrial zones, it would allow 1 food truck by right. Rob, can you limited to 4 hours of operation per day or 20 hours per week. Again, relief would be available from this via special use permit. For non-conforming uses, those residential uses that are within non-residential zoning districts, you would get the same standard as a residential house in a residential zone. They would be limited to private events, catering events, not served to the public. And for this one, they agreed to hours of operation limited from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. with, again, relief via special use permit.
I have a question on the special use permit in the non-residential. So is the special use permit applied for once and then it's allowed, or is it per occasion?
It carries with the property, so it would be.
Thank you.
It would be with the property. We go next. We considered provisions for food trucks on town-owned property, essentially allowing them subject to an issuance of an event permit and authorization from the town based on which either the school department or the Recreation Commission, whichever entity retained operational control of the site. And these are the general requirements that were kind of considered. When we undertook this, it very easily was apparent that it could get complicated. And staff and the planning board weren't entirely sure that we wanted to make it complicated. We wanted to make it work with enough provisions in there to ensure that it was successful. So the theory was, with requiring written permission from the property owner, that would almost self-regulate. We didn't believe that. I think the consensus was that a property owner was not going to allow a food truck to operate that was going to disturb their operation on the site or their neighbors, or that it would kind of self-regulate itself. The ordinance includes requirements that they must provide at least one trash receptacle for their operation on a site. There's prohibitions on the permanent installation of water or wastewater connections, and as well as the sale of alcohol. Allowance for temporary seating, but there was quite a bit of concern or focus on the fact that the fixtures of the food trucks themselves, the ancillary components like the seating and the trash receptacles and the way it functioned, that it wouldn't impair on-site circulation if it was in a parking lot that was sharing another use, that it didn't disrupt circulation or create any pedestrian safety issues. Also prohibits the use of loudspeakers, voice-amplified systems, or electronic noise-making devices. And focus on the fact that the sale of goods can only occur on the private property. We did not want to, I think one of the concerns was if you had a very successful food truck that may be parked, let's say, in close proximity to a front property line along a sidewalk, that the sales would start spilling out onto the public street. So there's provisions in the ordinance to prevent that. In regard to special use permits, some of the requirements would be a site plan, essentially to depict existing parking configuration and circulation areas, and a way to calculate the required parking for existing uses. Mobile food courts were further required to show the location and configuration of the food trucks, identify the service area for patrons, provide a parking narrative demonstrating complementary parking demand. A big component of the conversation was focusing around the fact that that an unused parking lot may be very suitable for a food truck, whereas they have more parking than the existing establishment needs, and it makes a lot of sense. So these requirements were focused on making sure that we get that information out into the special use permit application to make sure that it does in fact work for the property. And the last component is providing an on-site parking inventory, again assessing the utilization of existing parking and demand to ensure that the food court use is appropriate. And with that, that's the ordinance in a nutshell. I did want to point out one fact, again, speaking back to the minor housekeeping amendments. When we were drafting this, the original version of the ordinance referenced mobile food courts as mobile food establishment food courts. And in speaking with Amy, we were kind of said, can we just truncate that to mobile food courts? And she said yes. And we had included it in the definitions. However, we missed a couple of spots in the ordinance where we didn't pick it up. And those are on pages 1 and 2 under Use Code 56.5 on the Table of Use Regulations. There's 2 instances in the Table of Use Regulations that have that previous wording. And once again, on page 4, section 511.6, there are 4 instances in that section where it referenced mobile food establishment food court. And on the version that I had presented to you in your packet, you'll see that food establishment is striked out on that.
All right, thanks, Jay. Any questions for Jay at this point? All right. At this point, then, need to read something into the record.
For the record, we do have a letter from the planning board dated October 25th providing their recommendation that the council enact these proposed revisions.
Thank you. All right, with that, are there any folks who would like to come and speak about this mobile food establishment ordinance?
Hi, Kate Massinanti from Kingston. Totally was not planning on coming to speak to this, but one of the slides struck me as a little peculiar. The residential restriction of 11:30 start time to prevent parties in residential neighborhoods early in the morning. I find that a little, maybe I'm misunderstanding it and just need clarification, because say I wanted to have a party at my daughter's 9th birthday party at 9 a.m. on a Sunday, and I wanted to have a little food truck come and serve burgers or what have you. I find that a little bit restrictive, that I would have to wait. You know, maybe it was a cereal food truck or a donut food truck or something like that. I don't know. It just seems a little too restrictive and kind of made me raise my eyebrow a little bit, because the description was strictly to prevent parties from starting too early in the morning. And I kind of understand if we're talking about maybe fraternity parties, but in a residential zone, it just seems a little bit limiting to people's personal rights, I guess. So, thank you.
Any other comments on this ordinance?
I agree about the 11:30 thing. I think well, it's they can't apply for a special use permit, right? To right, and the path with the special use permit timing. What kind of what are we talking about?
But again, it's intended as a special use permit for the property. So you're contemplating, and actually the number of times this can happen on residential property is only twice a year. So you'd be anticipating 2 uses. It's a lot of effort to get a special use permit for this zone, for this application.
So I think we should change that start time from 11:30 to something. Somebody wants to have a brunch on their property, you know what I mean, at 9:30 in the morning, and have a coffee truck there. I don't know.
I think the same could be made, though, for an argument of making it later, as an example. And I think from what I understood, it was a happy medium that they came up with in terms of 11:30 to 9:30.
I attended the planning board work session where this was discussed, and it was clear that the planning board members were concerned about not introducing a commercial activity in a residential neighborhood that might have a detrimental impact on the residential character of the neighborhood. They talked about various times of day. They talked about more or fewer occurrences during a year on any given property. It really is just the planning board's, an expression, I think, of the planning board's concern that we not sort of backdoor a commercial use into residential properties. There's no noise ordinance in South Kingstown. The zoning regulation here will allow a commercial activity that currently is not expressly allowed.
What currently occurs. You know, I somewhat feel like this is a solution in search of a problem. You know, somewhat. I know the state came down on us and we had to address it, but I think this is a solution in search of a problem. So I am less inclined to go along with an 11:30 start time and put a burden on a homeowner or a family that wants to have a cupcake truck there at 9:30 in the morning and now has to, whoops, wait a minute, I have to come get a special use permit. I find that burdensome. So I would propose that we change the start time to 9 a.m. I can't imagine someone wanting to have a party at their house prior to that to get ready for it, but I think 9 a.m. is less burdensome on the public than 11:30.
Other thoughts on start time?
I'm okay with 9 a.m. I don't see any reason to not align the non-residential and the residential. I believe the non-residential per this presentation is 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., whereas the residential is 11:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. I see no reason to not align those two.
The non-residential zone, which also affects residential in a non-residential zone, is 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then we've taken the residential, or we're proposing the residential at 11:30 to 9:30. I agree with you to align the both of them to streamline the process.
And the stop time, or
10 a.m. is
10 p.m.?
10 p.m. Yes, is too late for someone to have, the barbecue truck in their backyard.
I would be amendable to that.
I don't feel strongly either way. I suppose until it happens to somebody, then we'll hear about it. But
So I will say that that was also, part of the planning board's discussion was we recognize that these are things that we're going to have to learn as we go. And what you do tonight will have an effect going forward, but it can always be revisited.
typically, the planning board is careful and prefers to learn the other way.
So I'm just it was a suggestion to move the start time to 9 and the end time?
Keep them both aligned,
9 to 10 for both.
Or make them both 11:30 to 9:30.
Yeah, I'm on board with aligning the two at 9 a.m. to 10 p.m.
And then if somebody wants to go later to the...
Then, a special use permit would be in order.
Yeah. Right. I'm okay with that change.
3.
The only thing that I would ask the council to consider is somebody mentioned, the frat house food truck. 10 o'clock is maybe pushing it in some neighborhoods. Just a thought.
It would be in mind.
Again, they can only do it twice a year, right? This is not an every weekend occurrence. This is you can have a food truck in your property twice a year. So I'm not.
And if problems arise in the future, we can always meet again to amend this.
Absolutely.
The other quick question I have is, there's really no good way to keep track of this anyway, right? In terms of the number of times, unless someone reports the party.
So enforcement of this zoning ordinance will fall to the zoning official. The zoning official does not generally work nights in South Kingstown, so it is going to be a challenge.
Right. Okay.
All right. Any further comments? Thoughts from the public? All right. Then I think we can close the public hearing.
We actually, yeah.
You want a motion to close the public hearing?
Please.
Second.
All right.
You didn't make a motion, did you, though? Okay.
Motion
All
to
right.
close the public hearing. Yeah.
So moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. So we're going to need another involved motion referencing the letter from the planning board and the amendments noted by our planner.
So you want to approve public hearing item 7B as amended. Those amendments specifically include the striking of the terms food establishment throughout, as was described by Jay during the public hearing, and to align the residential and the non-residential hours from 9 a.m. until 10 p.m. Also, you're going to adopt and include as part of your motion the recommendation from the planning board dated October 25th, find the consistency with the comprehensive community plan as well as the purposes of zoning.
I'll make that motion.
The amendments to the time.
And we did that.
He
okay.
included
Sorry.
that.
Your second.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that brings us to 7C, which is a public hearing to consider proposed amendments to the Town Code, Chapter 9, Licenses and Miscellaneous Business Regulations, that would establish regulations governing mobile food establishments, as shown on Exhibit 2, attached to your agenda.
You need a motion to open the public hearing?
It's open.
It's open, okay.
Is there a communication to be entered into the record? No.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing for item 7C.
Second.
I don't know if we made it clear enough. Is there anybody who would like to speak to
So
item?
just for clarification, what this is this is simply the application procedure. If you want to take advantage of the amendments you just made to the zoning ordinance, in order to do so, you go to the clerk's office and you fill out the application. These are simply the application requirements. They're consistent with the ordinance. I was just checking to make sure there's nothing in here that talks about the hours, and it's not in there, so I don't see any need to amend this. So this is really just a licensing procedure. But yes, you should ask if...
Seeing no comments, then I think a motion to close the public hearing is in order.
I'll make a motion to close public hearing 7C.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. And do I hear a motion on 7C?
I'll make a motion to approve item 7C as presented.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. And that brings us to item 8 on the agenda, communications. 8B is a letter dated November 26th from Joan Hudson, seeking assistance in preventing robocalls in South Kingstown. Rob, do we have any authority that would allow us to do that?
Make a motion.
But there is some new legislation, I thought, being presented at the national level.
So robocalls is actually a very old problem, and it is a matter that is regulated by the Federal Communications Commission and the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission has had a rule against robocalls for many years. However, the FCC has recently gotten more engaged in regulation, largely because the FTC's control only went to landlines. But this is a matter that is really beyond the municipality's authority. This is not something we can regulate. We don't have any ability to tell people they can't call other people.
That is as I suspected. Were you about to make a motion, Joe?
Motion to place communication item 8B on file.
Second.
So moved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. 8C is an email dated December 2nd, 2019, from Doral Beasley, declining appointment to the SMART Committee. We received that. What are we to do with it?
I would like to make a motion to place 8C on file, but to also notify the chair of the SMART Committee of Mr. Beasley's decision to decline the appointment, and that I guess we need to also look at appointing someone new to fill that position.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. 8D is an email dated December 3rd, 2019, from Richard Siegel, environmental consultant of R&B Consulting Services, requesting review of a draft fee agreement for insurance recovery for environmental liabilities. We talked about this very briefly in the work session. Do you want to say any more about it? Is this something that you would...
What I would ask the council do here is authorize the manager to enter into an agreement for the services described in the email upon review and approval by the town solicitor of the contract form.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to allow the town manager to enter into an agreement with this consulting company after review from the solicitor. I'd also like to add a cap of no more than 40% fee to this consultant.
I think this is a no-risk agreement, as described by Rob in the work session. I think we should pursue giving him full discretion as to what the contract entails. There are no upfront costs, and there are no costs upon no insurance, proceeds to be found to be paid out by a liable insurance carrier. So I believe that we should allow the town manager to use full discretion in authorizing him to proceed to contract with this consulting firm as it relates to this communication.
All right, so we have a motion. Did I hear a second to the motion? Because then we would have to amend it to make Rory's change. Or
I'll second.
all right, so we have a second. Do you guys want to?
The biggest thing there is I just want to make sure that it's a reasonable fee.
My concern is that are there other companies that do this as well? So if we don't cap the return, is there a company out there that would cap it at 35 or 40? You know what I mean? Whatever's reasonable.
Right.
I don't want to, this particular company came first. We don't want to say you can have 70% when there's a company that would do the same thing for 40.
Right. It is not a 70% fee that they've proposed. It's, I believe, 35%. And there may be other firms out there that do this sort of thing. We are not soliciting. We did not solicit this firm. We've not been, looking to find somebody to go find old insurance policies. It's a very, very niche business model. They look for old municipal dumps, and they look through your records to see whether or not there might be an insurance policy, and they then go talk to the insurers. We could go out and simply solicit and see if we can get another contractor to do it, but it's a professional service that is unique and is, again, so long as Mike's comfortable with the contract form, it's a sole source kind of thing. It's really, it's a very unusual business. They're really just bounty hunters. I mean, what they're doing is looking for insurance policies that we forgot we had.
It's a company out of Warburn, Mass, so it'd be pretty easy for them to commute down here. And
they will come down and look through our records and spend some time here and then go back and just sort of look for the types of insurance that they'd expect to see on this type of facility.
Yes. Did you find good? All right. Motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. And that brings us to 8E, an email dated December 4th, 2019, from Josh Rosen, president of the South Kingstown Little League, concerning the proposal for a land swap of town farm property with the South County Hospital. We received that. Is Josh here? No. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that we place item 8E on file. This will be addressed, I think, during the public hearing on January 13th with the land swap deal.
So,
Second.
So does that motion sort of send this letter to that public hearing? Was that?
I would send this letter to the public hearing, for the public hearing.
So we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. And that brings us to number 9, comments from interested citizens. So if you're here to speak about 13F, I would encourage you to come to the podium now. But you're,
You can
of course,
speak about anything, so.
you can speak to any item on the agenda or off the agenda as well. So just come to the podium, state your name for the record, and let us know what you're thinking.
Thank you, President Collins and Vice President DeCruz and fellow members of the South Kingston Town Council. My name is Tom Russell. And at the council's last meeting on November 25th, I spoke at some length about several issues residents of the Glen at Sagatucket community were having with the homeowner at 72 Sophia Court as they related to apparent conversion of a single-family dwelling into multiple family housing and, of course, the negative effects on the neighborhood, all without seeking town approval nor obtaining the necessary required permits. 3 days ago, on December 6th, I received a letter from the town clerk dated December 2nd, in which I expected answers to 3 very specific questions outlining my concerns. Instead, it lacked specificity, containing a general, wafer-thin, 19-word response to my inquiry. I'm here tonight in hopes that the council or the learned town solicitor will be able to put some additional substance to the clerk's boilerplate reply.
Thank you. Maybe during the solicitor's comment period, you can talk about efforts.
Thank you.
You don't have to raise your hand. Just come right up to the podium and say what you got to say.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is George Herkenrother, 111 Cedar Hollow Road. I speak in favor tonight of the land swap between the South County Hospital and the farm. I am a volunteer at the hospital. I work in the emergency room, and I also work in patients' rooms. And I can tell you that this parking problem at the hospital merits your attention for sure. Think of a number that would be the number you would guess of people who come into the emergency room on a Monday morning. Keep that number in your head while I tell you that last week it was a routine week. I don't have the numbers from this morning, but last week in 2 hours we had 22 cars arrive at the emergency room for treatment. Now on a Monday morning, the parking lot is already full with professionals, patients, visitors, and others. So finding room for those 22 emergency patients is always going to be a challenge with the current amount of space that we have. On any given day, irrespective of the emergency room, as a lowly volunteer, I look for a place to park and often have great difficulty just getting in myself to put in my shift. So, as you probably know, but if you don't, I want to remind you that South County Hospital is the only hospital in the Northeast that has won 2 years in a row 5 gold stars in each of 2 categories. One for the patient's experience and the other for the quality of treatment. Only hospital in the Northeast, including New York. 5 stars, both years, 2 years running. This organization deserves your support for being able to grow and handle our patients and make their experience as good as possible. And I ask for your support of the land swap. Thank you.
Anybody who might have come late, I just want to reiterate that we're very likely to be having a public hearing where these comments will have more weight than they will at the public comment.
Well, I hope this still has some weight. I can't make it that day. We have an event at the high school.
Yeah, please also, you can submit written testimony for any public hearing.
I'm Kate Massananti, Kingston, Rhode Island. I'm here to reiterate what the gentleman just spoke about. I've been going to and from the hospital my whole life, lived here my whole life. We've, go in and out. My children were born there. As the years tick by, you see that there's more and more traffic, there's more and more patients, there's more and more services. And unfortunately, over the course of the past 4 weeks, I've spent an exorbitant amount of time going in and out of the hospital, various hours of the morning, afternoon, and evening with sick parents and situations. The amount of cars that come in and out of that parking lot is, if you do yourself a favor just going there and sitting and watching. I was there this afternoon. It was probably around 2:15. The parking lot was full to capacity. They have their valet. It was 2 rows of cars back all the way out past the emergency room entrance. As I was pulling in, torrential downpours, I watched a lovely woman, I will approximate her age about 80, pushing a wheelchair with someone probably around 90 in it, pushing the wheelchair through the parking lot, trying to find her car. Last week, I had my mother. She's a 76-year-old. She's asthmatic. She's diabetic. She's got poor circulation in her feet, has trouble walking. She pulled up to valet. We were in separate cars because we're coming from separate areas. It was an emergent situation. The valet was full. She had to find parking elsewhere. So we had to park all the way in the far corner, back in what I called the pit. Is a dirt parking lot. She had to walk up 6 stairs, and then we had to guide her and walk her across the parking lot. Many people can go on with different anecdotes and stories, and then the final one is what most people know is that the area where the helicopter comes in to land to unload patients is a parking lot because there isn't enough room to have it exist as itself. So when a helicopter has to come in to transport, they have to actually call people to rush out to the parking lot and move their cars so that they can make room for the helicopter to land. It makes sense to expand the parking for an ever-expanding, very top quality. I will say, while I did not want to be there over the course of the past 4 weeks, the care that my family has received there is exemplary. It's, 10 years ago, we might have hesitated, but the difference in this hospital over the course of this decade was very, it was impressive, and I think we deserve to expand the ability to service people in a proper way, and to make sure that the most vulnerable people at the time, the patients, the visitors, coming in and out of there. You have wheelchairs all over the place. You have people who are injured. You have people parking, there used to be designated parking spots for women who are getting mammograms so that you didn't have, to make it easier because it's difficult to get women to come in to get mammograms. So they kind of designated areas for it so that you could kind of sneak in, sneak out. Those are full. People are parking there all the time. So just to reiterate, I know this isn't the actual hearing for it, but I won't be in for it, and I'm sure I'll send a letter. But I did feel the need to express my opinion, so thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ashley Foster from West Kingston. Again, I'm here to talk about the South County parking lot. I will not be able to attend, but I will send something in. But me and my sister and my family wanted to express about this concern because I don't know if you all are aware, there is a forum on Facebook about it, and that's how I learned about it. So about a month ago, my mom, Stephanie Foster, a.k.a. Stephanie Kearns, had passed away. A month prior to that, she was airlifted out of South County to Yale New Haven. During that time, we were told we were 2 hours out from, just getting airlifted out. We had been to South County multiple times, and it is always a battle to find parking. My grandparents, who have parking passes for handicap parking, battle to find parking. That time alone, just getting people out of that helicopter pad, there was 2 cars towed, and when my dad arrived, he had to use my mom's handicap pass to park in the handicap pass parking spot just to park so he could get on that plane with my mom. I definitely feel a need that it needs to expand. I know a lot of people in this town, especially our older generation, loves that we can see the views from the different levels of the hospital, and that there is a need for the farmland, and I can see that it means a lot to people. But our town is growing, and we have URI students who are growing, and our summer visitors, that number is growing as well. And it makes us townies hard to find parking for our families. So as I won't be there that day, I hope that you take my story into consideration. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Elle Nordzi. I live at 8 Broadmoor Road in Wakefield. I'll try to keep it short because I know we have another meeting coming up. I was pretty angry at the Recreation Commission meeting. I want to commend them for taking our comments in stride, even as some of us kind of veered off the focus of the value of recreational facilities in our town. I'll try to give you the Cliff's Notes of what I've written, and I'm going to give you the full version, of course. I'm a land specialist for a development company. I develop utility-scale solar. I would consider myself an expert in GIS, research, public records, and those other methodology for evaluating land and suitable uses for land. When I purchased my home on 8 Broadmoor, which is right on the corner of Broadmoor and Woodruff, it's in the neighborhood near the hospital, I did my due diligence. I examined flooding, is there any empty lots that maybe they want to build a Dollar General there right next to my house? I don't know. I looked at everything, and I thought I covered all my bases. I was happy to see that there's a playground within walking distance and a ball field, open space where kids can run. The house that I purchased is not large at all. The lot is not large, so it's nice to have other options very close by. On top of that, I saw that it was in a conservation easement held by the National Park Service, which holds a lot of weight. I do recognize that living next to the hospital is also an asset. Nobody is arguing that the South County Hospital is an asset to our community, and nobody doubts, that the role that they play for South Kingstown and greater South County. I've gone to the East Greenwich and Westerly satellite offices as well. If the question before the town council today is, should we vote to send this to DEM, are we asking DEM to ask National Park Service to do this land swap? The answer should definitely be no. This has been asked before the town, before previous councils, probably before any of our town, over and over again. Part of that easement and property has already improperly been sold to the hospital, which was discussed during the Recreation Commission. Few things, again, I'm going to try to keep this quick and skim over my notes. I went to the playground, actually not to the hospital, I went to the playground on Sunday, and the lots were empty. Both of the dirt lots were totally empty. The majority of the parking lot was empty. You probably could have fit 5 helicopters on that parking lot. It's not an issue of being short on space, it's an issue of improper scheduling. I had my son there. I was visiting the hospital frequently, 2014, 2015 timeframe, and there was no parking issues. I was there all the time. I was a frequent flyer. So we bought the house in August. When I went there in October, all of a sudden, my primary care physician had moved from 360 Kingston Road at the Narragansett Rotary to the hospital, adding to the parking problem. I was driving around, I was like, what is going on? I had no idea that there was even this big of an issue because, like I said, in 2015 there was not that big of an issue. I think this is a self-created problem by the hospital by bringing in primary care physicians, different medical offices that operate during so-called business hours, Monday through Friday, 9 to 3 or 9 to 5 kind of hours. I think that they could greatly alleviate their parking problem if they move those types of business hours, routine appointments. We're not talking emergency care, I went in maybe for a sinus infection, and then 2 weeks later I had just my physical. They can be moved, and it will alleviate a lot of the problems. The other thing that I really strongly want you to consider is the precedent that this sets. This isn't the only property in town that is under a National Park Service easement. There are several open spaces that are protected by this easement, including Tuckertown Park, which everyone touts as being, we did the land swap in the 80s. We got Tuckertown Park out of it. It's the same kind of easement. So if you say, this private entity wants to take over town land that has an established recreation use, that is under a conservation easement, I think that's just acting in bad faith. Also, I would urge you, if you're not familiar with the DEM Ocean State Outdoors Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan, this was issued in August of 2019, I would go through that because it addresses several points that you're supposed to keep open space open. If it's conserved, if it's under a conservation easement, that it's like that for a reason. Some of the language in this document, if a resource was acquired or improved with federal funding through National Park Service, Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is this parcel in question, or other public funds, approval of any conversion is required to be conditioned upon a full one-for-one replacement of the acreage or resource value. They also, in the slideshow, it said it should be the location should be similar and the use should be similar. The proposed parcel on Glen Rock doesn't meet either of those two requirements at all. The other thing is that it really, it talks about people would like to participate more in outdoor recreation, but crowding, difficulty in locating facilities, and distance are the main barriers to accessing outdoor recreation facilities in the state of Rhode Island. Health and well-being should receive more consideration as part of outdoor recreation planning, and it also includes the Park RX, connecting health outcomes to outdoor recreation, and I'll skip over reading the entire thing for you. It does mention actually South Kingstown Land Trust as being part of that, and I also will say that the town recreation manager, I believe, was on the advisory committee. Yes, the South Kingstown Recreation Director, Teresa Murphy, was on the advisory committee to creating this document. Requests for conversions should be resisted and should face the highest burden of proof of net public recreational benefit. And we're not just talking about, the dollar for dollar, the land value, the assessment, none of that. We're talking about the actual value of what this brings to the community and the town. I believe there's solutions to their parking issues that don't involve taking over a public resource and also don't involve paving over a very environmentally sensitive area. Again, I can get into all that much greater detail in January and in my letters, and I'll send you maps and pictures as well. But I don't think that we should even be moving forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments tonight? Any issue as well?
Hi, my name is Doug Gobey. I'm over at 78 Glen Rock Road. I'll keep it short. I certainly have a lot I could say on this, and I will say it on the 13th. I'm glad I'm not the only scientist here. And I hope I can also bring maps and plots, because I've been doing my own due diligence after the 4th, where a lot of information is given to us. And that's where I want to start today with, while we talked about at the beginning there are more people here, I've had time since the 4th to talk to people on my street. This is, again, Glen Rock Road, where this is all being performed. I like to joke I'm the low man on the totem pole. I've only been there for 5 years. As Wayne said, his family's been there for 4 generations, and they're not even the oldest. I won't quote some of my neighbors. It's not pleasant language. People are furious. We have my neighbor who is elderly, and her husband is not well. She cannot come to this kind of event. And she was given no notice other than when I managed to see her yesterday and informed her. And for a woman in her 70s, that was some salty language. That's all I'll say on that matter. We have been poorly informed at best. Even when we showed up tonight, you were surprised, which is interesting. We asked, and I understand the mistake was made exactly when we were becoming to talk about this. We were told the 9th, and so we came, and we were prepared. And we've now been told, oops, by the way, not so much. And so, again, we will be scrambling to find a new date. It's not easy to change your schedule when we're told on the 4th that 5 days later something will be happening. As an educator over at URI, it's exams right now. I have moved the heavens and the earth as an astronomer to be here for this, and this is upsetting. My students are at a lesser advantage now because I've had to be here sitting around for something that we're going to do later on. It would be lovely if the town could make any attempt to communicate with people on the very road that this is going to affect. Not even the local area, for one. People in Wakefield barely got any notice. We got none. We were told we were going to get additional notice. We got none. And so we're here before you. Again, there's so much I could say, and there is so much I will say on the 13th. We hear that the hospital needs parking. A lot of places need parking. We heard in 1983 that the hospital needed parking. And as a good steward and a good neighbor in the community, we rallied to their cause. And we did something we shouldn't have done, or at least not the way we did it, and it went through. In 2001 and 2006, we did this again. Town Farm Park was a gift to this town given in perpetuity. That's not a light word at all. Forever. It is a promise. And while these parties are dead, we are here talking about saying, maybe we could do something with that. Well, what have we done so far? Since 1983, we have taken exactly 60% of a 7.2 acre parcel and converted it into parking lots. They have taken 4.2 acres, 1 ball field, and extended other structures, and we're down to the 3 acres that are left. Twice now, on the record, we have been good neighbors in this community, working hand in hand with our hospital. They are a part of this community. They help members of this community. We've heard people talk about that, and no one is saying anything about not wanting to help the hospital, that the hospital is working against us. No, that's not the statement here at all. First and foremost, the statement is, why must we take again from the public for a public good? We've done this game. We've done this game twice, and now we want to do it again. The data says about every 17 years we do this. So should we be finding ourselves here in about 2035, 2036, discussing how we'll be expanding perhaps into the Marina Park because we have more parking needs? Hospitals, prisons, and a number of other places are well known for their creep, and that is exactly what we're seeing here. I'm not arguing against the hospital. I'm not arguing against its needs for parking. I am certain that there's need for parking. I'm also certain there's other ways around this than taking from the public. Just because we're so caught up, we've got a great opportunity, as we've been told by the town manager, and I agree. I also did my due diligence when I moved into town 5 years ago. I worked very hard to choose exactly where I would be, and the people who live around me have done the exact same. It's gorgeous, but it's also not right. The statement before is, to quote the federal regulation, reasonable equivalent usefulness and location as that being converted. Now, it does allow for passive to active, but it frowns on it. It certainly does not meet the spirit of the law, and it absolutely does not meet the letter of the law. We're taking away from children. In the presentation that we were given, we were told a lie, I'll be kind, a dishonest truth, that Town Farm Park is only used by preschoolers and, I'm trying to remember their language right now, basically 14-year-olds and less is what we were told. I don't want to sound too crude here, but as a scientist, we have a thing called null hypothesis. All I need to do is poke one hole in your argument when you do that. You made an absolute claim that it's used only by people under 14. I've used it. I wish I was that young still, but I'm not. And I have taken family members there. And while I've been at the hospital, I mentioned at the 4th, I have gone out to that park. It's a beautiful respite. To be perfectly honest with you, I thought it was part of the hospital when I first realized about it. As I've done my due diligence here, I've realized it's got a much scarier history. It's in a great place. We have opportunities to find compromise here without taking away from the community and continuing to try and be good stewards in the community, working with our hospital. There was a discussion during the rec meeting on the 4th of building something like a sky bridge, allowing easier access across Route 1 to Marina Park and to have shared parking during the week. This would be actually something that would benefit both parties, rather than the town gives more of something that was never given to the town to be given away. And we would actually get something. People would be able to now make more use of both parks. That is something. But just saying, well, 60% of the 7.2 acres is enough. We'll take the rest of the 3.2 and we'll get back to you later on and what else we'll need in 2035. I don't see this ending. Again, the track history is real. 1983, 2001, 2006, and now 2019. This has been going on for 40 years. I suspect it will continue. Thank you.
All right. Any further comments tonight? Any comments from up here at the council table? All right.
The only comment I would make is we have a very important process that we're going to be going through, and we want to make sure that everyone is heard and to find the absolute best possible solution to this problem, with trying to alleviate any issues or concerns people would have. And I think we should be open to many different ideas and suggestions on this issue.
Hi, how you doing? I'm Wayne Reed. Lived in 760 Glenrock Road all my life. I played baseball down at that ball field when I was in Little League. And I've also practiced at, there's a South Road baseball field that doesn't get utilized for anything. Why don't we use that area as a possible starting point, as opposed to putting a baseball field right down in an area where it's traffically, it's unwise, and it's unethical. It borderlines my property, which I have farmland, and farmland I have to protect. So, I mean, if somebody goes straying off the path, they end up in my backyard, how am I going to know that they're not an animal? They're not wearing the orange that you're supposed to wear during hunting season. Or I've also, the Sosnowskis rent property off of me. So that land is, well, I've been told I have a right to protect their property that they're growing on my property. So if somebody goes wandering off, what happens then? Where's the liability? It's a bunch of farmland. It's all farmland, you know, and everybody wants to protect their crops. So if somebody gets off the beaten path, now am I at fault because somebody's on my property? I just find it bad when you have ball fields around the world, or well, in South Road, that you can use for recreational purposes. There's a park right up at West Kingston off Kingstown Road. Has a basketball court and everything. So, I mean, what's the benefit if it's only like 4 miles away? and it's actually closer to South County Hospital than the proposed spot.
Thank you.
Did I see someone?
I'm just going to change the subject entirely and thank Parks and Recreation for a lovely holiday event yesterday. Event at the Guild and then in the adjoining playground was well done and well received by the public, and I think the staff deserves our accolades.
Always good to see Santa out there. Any other comments? All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of public comment for tonight and to the town manager's report.
All right, well, I will start off tonight as I have pretty much every meeting for the last 6 or 8 months, talking about the proposed land swap with South County Hospital. As we've heard tonight, that application continues to proceed. The application is complete at this point. We have an application that's been prepared by the town, that's been preliminarily reviewed by the state of Rhode Island's Department of Environmental Management. We believe the application is ready to be transmitted from the town to the state when the public hearing requirement under the regulations, under the National Park regulations, and the 30-day comment period regulation has been complied with. So before the council tonight is a notice of public hearing that would set the public hearing for January 13th and would open a public comment period starting December 13th and closing on January 13th, the night of the public hearing. Once those two things have been done, we've checked all of the boxes with regard to the regulation. Again, it is not our application to the National Park Service, but we will have handed everything we can to the DEM so DEM can make that application. They will do their review and make a determination about whether or not that application is one that they want to transmit to the National Park Service. I would expect that a decision by DEM on that question would be made in January or February, with transmission to the National Park Service in January or February. At that point, the National Park Service will begin its review and will go through the regulatory checklist that they have, and will answer questions like, is this location, the proposed location, the receiving location, sufficiently valuable in terms of its recreation? Is it equal or greater than the value that is being surrendered by the community? Is the monetary value there? Is the location sufficiently similar? I will say that from our point of view in South Kingstown, the northwest corner of South Kingstown and the pond are very different. From the perspective of somebody in Washington, it's southern Rhode Island. I mean, it's not necessarily going to be seen through the same lens when the National Park Service looks at questions like, is it of a similar location? The biggest question I have about the application is the equivalency of the uses. It's been noted here tonight that the regulation does have a preference for like-kind properties, ball fields for ball fields, basketball courts for basketball courts. The regulation does allow for an argument to be made for passive recreation instead of active recreation. And our application will assert that because of the changing demographics, the need for passive recreation is growing in South Kingstown, so that this is an appropriate park to add to the inventory, and that the ball field has had declining use in recent years. It isn't zero, but it has been a declining use ball field, as a letter from the Little League representative tonight attests to. The ball field is not used, that ball field is not used as much as it once was. So the application will proceed, and the next step in the process is the public comment period, which begins on the 13th, if the council agrees to that date tonight, and a public hearing on the 13th of January again, if the council agrees to those dates tonight.
Rob, can you just touch on the what happens after the public hearing on the 13th?
After the public hearing on the 13th of January, again, we will have resolved the two remaining prerequisites to filing an application with the National Park Service. So everything that DEM would do if it was in our shoes will have been done at that point. We will hand off a packet to the DEM that says, here's the application, here's the proposed land that we're giving up, the proposed parcel that we would take, the use that is being abandoned, the use that we are proposing for the new location, an explanation and justification for the swap, and a attestation that the public hearing has been held, that public comments have been received. Those public comments will be made part of the record that goes to DEM, and DEM will decide whether or not it wants to make an application to the National Park Service for a conversion. Again, DEM is the program administrator in Rhode Island. We are not. We were a sub-recipient of the funds back in '76 when we received these monies. It is DEM that is responsible for making an application to the National Park Service.
So what you're saying is that the open comment period, any comments that we receive will be submitted, plus any comments made that night?
That's correct. That's correct. All right. Red high significance or high challenge, significant challenge items. Brewery pretreatment continues to be an issue. You've heard from Director Schock on this a couple of times over the last few months. It does continue to be an issue. He continues to work with the brewery operators and is trying to resolve that problem, but we are not getting to an immediate or quick resolution on it. Call volume for EMS continues to surge during the day. In the evenings, we do have continued reliance on mutual aid. As the council knows, we've got a new vehicle, new quarters, and new staff coming on January 5th. That should go a long way toward resolving our dependence on mutual aid. In a related matter, we also have on the agenda tonight a contract for the council's approval for a new billing company, a company that will go out and make sure that third-party payers are billed for the services that our EMS paramedics provide. I will note there had been some concern expressed over the last couple of months about a proposal on Fairgrounds Road to subdivide a parcel there. The owner of that property, who had been contemplating subdivision, had applied for a decision by the Director of Public Works with regard to sewers, and was told that sewers would have to be installed before the subdivision was made. That the Director of Public Works deemed subdivision a development activity, and because it was a development activity, sewers would have to be installed before the subdivision could proceed. They had initially indicated that they were planning to file an appeal of that Director of Public Services decision. That appeal has not come in, and I am beginning to believe that we may not see that appeal. So it looks like that project may be taking a different direction. I will note on a positive front, we have made an application to the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank for a resiliency grant in support of our Matunic Seawall Phase 2 project. The Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank has a sort of pilot grant program that they're undertaking. Some of the members of council participated in a meeting held about 6 or 8 months ago where the Infrastructure Bank came in and talked to the community members about what we thought we might be able to do to improve resiliency here in town. They had $1 million that they had slated for resiliency grants. There were 4, actually 5, 2 communities were working together. So there were 4 communities that were eligible to apply for funding from this $1 million pot of grant money. We were one of those four. Our application is for $500,000 to support the construction of the seawall. I'm not sure that this is the scale project that they had in mind. In fact, I'm pretty comfortable in saying that it's larger in scale than what the Infrastructure Bank had in mind when they set up this small pilot program. But in racking our collective brains, this really is the only project that we need to get done as soon as possible. There are other things that might be nice, but the seawall is a big deal.
Well, can we, anything we can do to help move that along? Because I know it's probably unlikely that we're going to receive the grant, but
there really is not a whole lot of money out there. We'd love to see highway money on it. We've made applications over the last several years. We've made numerous applications for state and federal grants. There just isn't a whole lot of grant money out there. As I mentioned in the work session, I think that this is going to ultimately just come down to us doing this. We're going to have to take care of this ourselves, I think. This is a very difficult project, and every time we have a storm, we run the risk of millions and millions of dollars worth of damage being done. And we run the risk of hundreds of homes being isolated. This is a big problem. We've got the design through, we've got the project scoped out, we've got all of the approvals and permits necessary. Getting here was not easy. Probably a little bit easier because everybody in the regulatory world recognizes what a danger we face if this work isn't done. But the funding just isn't showing up. And I don't know that we're going to be able to wait for Santa Claus to bring a bag of funds for us. Just quick statistics on October in-person checkouts. Our libraries continue to be vibrant and robust places. Folks still come to the library. 9,200 checkouts at Peacedale, nearly 3,000 at Kingston, and 1,100 at Hale. And that's the manager. Is there? Nope, that's the manager's report.
Any other questions for Rob? All right, solicitor's report.
I'll give you an update on Sophia Court. So obviously, behind the scenes, we've been working very closely with both the police department and the building officials' offices. I think that the response to Mr. Russell was skinny purposely because although when we do something in court, obviously that's all very public, the preparation work before we get there and strategy and how we're going to ensure that hopefully we have a case that a judge will find convincing is not something we like to explain until after we get there. What we're talking about here is search and seizure. It's a constitutionally protected right. A search and seizure over a civil matter, which is what this is, violation of our ordinance, presents a high bar. Having said that, we've been back and forth again with the police department and the building official. I'm pretty confident that we have all the information now that we need. We'll be seeing a judge most likely by the beginning of next week because we've got to get a lot of things signed off on before we get that far. So there will be some progress made between now and the next meeting for sure, and hopefully on the 13th I'll be able to report to you exactly what that is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to appointments. I forgot to check whether we have any. All right, very good. Oh, yeah, that's right.
At the last town council meeting, I was appointed to the school committee's newly formed budget committee. It has become clear that my requests for time and dates of meetings cannot be met. As a result, I believe I cannot be an effective member of that committee, and as of now, I am removing myself from that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Rory. So did we need a special notation to appoint somebody to that committee? I guess we probably did.
Well, so you just received the resignation, so to speak. I don't know if you're going to try to fill that tonight or at a subsequent.
We had, I think, 2 people interested in that committee, correct?
So it would be appropriate to appoint somebody?
Absolutely. It's on the list of appointments. So.
I mean, I would be willing to take on this committee task if you guys want to appoint me to it.
I'll make a motion to appoint Abel Collins to the vacancy.
Second.
So moved. Any comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, and that brings us to 13, new business.
I'll make a resolution to
sorry.
appoint William Wallace as the tree warden, reappoint.
Second?
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
No, you got it. All right, 13A, a resolution establishing an annual permit fee of blank for mobile food trucks and blank for temporary mass gathering permits, and amending the town's schedule of fees in accordance with the town code, Chapter 9 licenses and miscellaneous business regulations, Section 9-196 permit fees.
So state law sets a maximum on these fees, but it doesn't set a minimum. I'll tell you what's going on elsewhere. Susan, you have something? And the fees basically range from maximum from $50 to $300. The $300 is that it's coming in Part B, which is the large mass gathering. What a lot of towns are doing is they're charging a nominal fee. They're not trying to make it difficult for people in the food truck business, whether it's the cupcake guy or woman or whatever. They've been doing between $10 and $25. So this is discretionary. Susan, you may have a different idea on what,
We're getting your Narragansett fee as a reference. The new business resolution A calls for a registration fee and a temporary mass gathering permit fee. The temporary mass gathering permit fee in Narragansett is?
Well, if she's looking, let me explain what a mass gathering is. A mass gathering is when you're going to have a concert, so it's like 500 or more people, and you're going to bring in these food trucks to service those people. So that's why that one's a lot higher than...
So Narragansett's answer to the MAD label here is $75 for the mobile food truck fee and $250 for the temporary mass gathering permit.
So this fee applies to any mobile food truck, not just the food court?
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
So if you're having a party at your house and you want the hamburger truck to come
Yes.
from, they operate out of Charlestown, these folks would have had to have paid South Kingstown a fee to come here. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Which is... you don't have to keep coming, yes.
Are the trucks licensed on the state level as well? What is the fee on the state level?
They pay a fee. I can't tell you that off the top of my head. I will tell you in Barrington and Bristol, unlike Narragansett, they went with the low end.
I'm inclined, I think the food trucks are already paying on the state level.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to go with the smallest fee we can justify.
I was thinking 25.
Thinking 10.
Do I hear
Or
5?
5.
There are two different fees here.
Yeah, the mass gathering
First,
fee.
let's address the mobile food truck fee, right?
That's the basic one.
That burden is on the food truck. The mass gathering is on the promoter.
So
I think it's two different issues.
It is.
So the permit fee is so that we have record of who is liable or having control of that particular food truck.
It's a registration fee.
Right, which I think is important. To me, the fee doesn't really matter if it's $10 or $20. To me, if $10 is going to be less of a burden, but at the same time, it's paperwork on our end.
Staff has been very careful not to make a recommendation here because this is really just a policy question. It's what should the fee be? One thing that I would ask the council to consider is that every registration that we process does take us some time. It does take some effort to keep track of these things. We maintain a database. Maintaining a registry is not a free activity.
Yeah.
And if we're not covering that with the fee, then we're covering that with tax dollars instead. The benefit goes to the business that is permitted to engage in business in South Kingstown. The fee, I would suggest, ought to be appropriate to cover the cost. Now, processing this application on any given application is not 2 hours, but it's a portion of an hour.
What are the current fees? So if I have a vendor's license in South Kingstown now, or a peddler's license, or whatever we're calling them at this point, what's the fee now? $50. Annual fee for a food truck to operate in South Kingstown now. Okay. But now they're paying on the state level as well, which they weren't doing before, correct?
That's correct.
Right.
So is this altering the peddler's license, or is peddler's license? Okay. So the peddler's license will no longer exist.
So I have a question.
No, just it does. It just they've copped food trucks out of it.
Okay.
We still have a peddler's license, and the peddler's license is still a $50 annual registration. If you're going to be selling balloons at the parade, it's $50
For annual.
to do that. That's correct.
So
this is annual as well.
These food trucks are paying on the state level now. They weren't before.
Good.
They were just paying South Kingstown $50. I'm looking at the burden on the business.
So what does a restaurant pay for its annual license without liquor? I mean, it should at least be equal playing ground here.
I like 25. I'm with you, Bryant.
But I kind of agree with Joe, too.
I don't think it's fair to the restaurant that has to pay 50.
Different volume or similar volume, but I
Food
guess.
truck's not going to be
it's an
operating
annual-
6-7 days a week during the
It's an
same
annual fee.
hours comparable to a restaurant that's a building.
Right? And the restaurant's paying rent. The restaurant's paying a lot of other things. I think 50 is fair. I think they should be equal with.
So if a food truck prior to this new law at the state level, they were paying $50 already? Or, okay.
I will point out that with a peddler's license, though, your operation was greatly constrained. They had to keep moving. Literally could not park a food truck on the streets in South Kingstown, and arguably in zones where restaurant service was not allowed. Now, in reality, we've had food trucks in residential neighborhoods prior to this, and there's been no enforcement. Prior to this, we've had food trucks in commercial and industrial zones as well, and we have not enforced the regulation that says you can't do food service in the industrial zone. So to this date, it's been a sort of gray area because we've all known that the state was going to be regulating in this area and that we'd have to deal with this at some point. So peddlers prior to this ordinance paid $50 but could not park on the streets and could not, in compliance with the zoning,
It was very difficult.
park in the parking lots out next door to an old factory or something like that.
And then we also had some people concerned of how close you were parked to another restaurant.
That's right.
But they still can't park on the street.
No, actually they can. There'll be some places in South Kingstown where folks will be able to park trucks.
Can we identify those places?
I think there was a zone,
It's in that zoning chart?
I think so. Wasn't it in a chart?
No.
Oh, it should be, I guess, right?
So the state rule is now food trucks are allowed. Our rule is that food trucks are allowed in the zones identified in the ordinance that the council has passed tonight, and subject to the regulations that are enacted by the town council with regard to the restriction on licenses
On street.
on street.
Knowing that, and they're getting more benefit, and I do feel for the small business owner, but restaurants are also small business owners, and if they're already currently paying 50 and now going to get a better benefit, I would be okay with the 50. But at the same time, it's also fair to keep it in line with what other organizations are paying. But I also see Deb's point of the concern that they're paying at the state level. I wish I could know what they're paying at the state level. Does anyone know?
Is that what you said?
Well, are the restaurants paying something to the state for their
Restaurants
license?
to be licensed by the Department of Health.
Sure.
I'm assuming they would. No, they don't.
She's saying now there is.
Okay. I would hope.
I think 50 is fair.
I'm sticking with 25. I feel these food trucks don't have an opportunity to make as much revenue as compared to restaurants. I feel like it's non-comparable. Hours of operation is big disparity in comparing the two. It's really two totally different monsters in my opinion. I don't think the fees should be the same. I think 25 is okay with me. I don't think it should go higher than that.
I just want to add one more thing I thought of. I think if we make it different than the restaurants, I think we're going to get a lot of pushback. And I remember when with the peddler's license, we had a lot of people coming in, I thought, to our meetings complaining about the competition, being able to be mobile.
The unfair.
Yeah, unfair, right.
How does everyone feel about the mass gathering permit? Because this is going to be one motion.
Again, the Narragansett fee on this is $150 per event. I'm sorry, $250. $250.
Can go up to
Nonprofits are $150 for mass gatherings.
Do we have other regulations that surround mass gatherings? I don't understand, like, so is it 500 people coming to a field? Is it 500 people coming in and out of a field over 4 hours? I'm confused as to what this actually is.
And I guess on top of that, is a mass gathering, would that be like if there was a tournament, like a soccer tournament in town somewhere?
Right, and the Dell's truck is up there, and does they have to apply for a mass gathering permit for the soccer game because it's a tournament? Is that a mass gathering?
So they would need a mass gathering permit if there were food trucks or a food truck there.
Well, if you go to some of the soccer events, which we have here, the Dell's truck is there, right? So that's a food truck.
Mm-hmm.
Now they have to apply for a mass gathering permit.
The
South
organizer
County
of the
Youth
event
Soccer
does.
Association now.
Food truck, I think, right?
No, the organizer of the event.
The South County Youth Soccer Association would now have to apply.
Only if it's on private property. It only refers to mass gatherings on private property.
So they're at URI. So what does that constitute, Mike?
But my guess.
I want to see how this is going to affect the organizers of these events. It's
Well,
really what I'm.
Let me ask you this, Mike. Are there communities that have no mass gathering permit fee? I mean, we don't have one yet, right?
That's correct. That is correct.
So the communities that are adding this food truck fee.
Communities that are adding it have all added a fee for mass gatherings. And while I'm on fees, and before I forget, I did look up what these food trucks have to pay. The state fee is $50. Just so whatever you make it's $50 more. Right. Yeah, the communities that I work with have all assessed a fee for the mass gathering in the rationale behind it is, well, because we got to get the police department involved. There's a lot of administrative burden that goes along with that.
Right now, there is no permit. So when the South County Youth Soccer Association has those big tournaments at 4th of July up at URI, they do not apply currently for a South Kingstown mass gathering permit. Is that what I'm hearing? Or a permit at all?
So what it does is it references special events as defined in the food code regulations promulgated by the Rhode Island Department of Health for festivals and concerts. I don't believe what was contemplated by this is your basic baseball, soccer, lacrosse.
The Balloon Festival, right? Case in point, the Balloon Festival.
I may be able to clarify just a bit. In terms of any of our town facilities and parks, truck vendors, mobile vendors are not allowed within the parks because we generally have concession buildings. We contracted with a lemonade vendor as a mobile food truck for the town beach this past season. But in terms of the public parks, right now, mobile food vendors are not allowed in. Now, do they show up on weekends? Probably, likely. I know that has happened at Tuckertown, but they're not allowed in to the public parks, particularly where we have concession buildings in operation.
Right, but what if they're at URI? So a public gathering space, it's not a town park.
Yeah, but URI is not
private property.
Private property. It's very clear in the statutory definition that it only applies to private property. So if someone has some big parking lot and...
So this affects Sons of Liberty how? So they have those food truck nights every Thursday in the summer, right? Every once a month, I think they have them in the summer. 500 people obviously come in and out of that parking lot over the course of the 4-hour event. Yep. There are 7 or 8 food trucks there. Do they now have to apply for a mass gathering permit in order to host that?
I don't think so, because in looking at the definition, it talks about 500 or more people that continues or reasonably can be expected to continue for 2 or more hours at the event. So you're thinking of 500 people there all at once for 2 hours. Now, again, the state's done us such a favor here. The enforcement of this, having someone go out there and count, obviously that's not going to happen. I think we just have to be practical about it.
So I do see your point, and I do think that events like that are what are contemplated by this language. It's the private party on a farm where there's a concert or there's some gathering of 500 or more people around the food trucks. It is the street festival kind of event. It's the setting up at to pick a arbitrary spot, but the Dale Carlia corner parking lot in front of Wakefield Liquor. If you can get 500 people on that lot, which you probably can, yes, that's a mass gathering. If 500 people are going to be there for the afternoon,
so to apply for a permit,
you would have to get a permit. In that case.
Downtown Village, that happens three times a year, I think.
That's right.
That's a public street.
It's a public street.
Public sidewalks. I would say that doesn't meet the definition. Right?
A lot of it happens on
500
private property.
people in one of those venues on Main Street, right? So that's not going to fall under this.
Yeah. Make them both 50. I guess what I was thinking is more about covering, our costs, making it something that we're not going to make money on, but needing to cover the cost of what it's going to take to just administer and keep track of those permits. And we know, for instance, on Oktoberfest, the Village Association hires police details when they close the street.
Yep.
So,
it's public property.
Right.
I would say that would not fall.
But off the street, there's sometimes 500 people there.
Mm-hmm. Off the street?
Off the street on private property behind the restaurant, yes. Yeah, it's unusual.
Are there food trucks
trucks
back in that
there,
parking lot?
Right.
No, but it's not food trucks. It's just they set up tents, and actually the food, I think a lot of it comes from the restaurant.
So these are great questions, and it goes to show how messy things get when you try to implement. But what was contemplated is that someone's doing an event, whether it's a festival, a feast, whatever, on a private piece of property, and they're inviting food trucks to that event to disperse or dispense food. I don't think anything that you've described, Joe, is going to fall into that category.
You're right.
Remember, this is all under this new Article 8, which is mobile food establishments. This doesn't create a new mass gathering permit requirement other than those gatherings of 500 or more people
with food
associated
trucks.
with food trucks.
On private property.
On private property.
And did I read a 90-day permitting process here? Did I see that?
Yes, you did.
That's on public property. That's on public property.
Right.
Private property, what is the permitting?
How many food trucks can you have at a time? Just
The next
one?
agenda item.
Oh, sorry. So I've been to food truck things that have 20-plus food trucks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, at one event, yeah.
Mhm.
But we get
Which I enjoy, by the way.
Right. So, Councilor Kelso, the 90-day requirement is you have to make an application for an event on public property 90 days before the event. There is no similar restriction on the time or no lag or it has to be prior to period for mass gatherings. The question is whether the permit can be issued in time, so you can't wait to the day before and hope you're going to get the permit, or the mass gathering permit. However, there's no requirement that it be 90 days before. And that's really because an event that's going to be on public property needs to be built into our schedules. We can't just have folks show up and say, I want to do an event next Tuesday in Marina Park, and oh, you've got to cancel your public concert because that's when I want to do it.
Now I'm more confused.
Okay.
Temporary mass gathering permit applies to both public and private property?
No.
Then what is that 90-day? You just told me there was a 90-day
For
permitting process for public property.
That's correct.
For
So
what permit?
permits for events proposed to be located on public property. You must make your application for the permit to hold an event on public property 90 days before the event is proposed to be held.
But is that only if you're going to have food trucks?
Yes. All of this is only if food trucks are involved. All of this.
Fee for that? We just talked about there being no fee.
There's no.
For public property.
So the fee, if it's a mass gathering, would be the same fee that you're arguing about now. Either if you were in Narragansett, the fee associated would be $250 or $150 if you were a nonprofit. It is the mass gathering fee if it's a mass gathering on public property.
Okay, now I'm understanding the mass gathering fee is only going to apply to private property. Only to private property. And applications for
Position to what the town manager just said.
It is. And I'm sorry, but it starts out with the definition for mass gatherings as private property. So
Until we get a clear indication of what it affects. I'm hearing two different. I'm okay with the mobile
Right.
truck permit going forward tonight, but I'm not okay with this mass gathering permit fee until I know what it applies to.
Yep. There is a conflict. The conflict is that the ordinance as drafted does require the application to be for a permit. There's no designated fee associated with that in the fee schedule that you're applying. There's two ways to resolve that. One way to resolve that would be to come back to the council for a fee schedule adjustment at a later date, because we cannot do that tonight, and deal with the strict reading, and I think Mike's actually right, that a temporary mass gathering is truly only private property. What we need to do to resolve the question of what that permit in the section above deals with is have a fee associated with events that are proposed to be held on public property. In the absence of that, You have to sort of go to either the registration fee, which doesn't require a permit. You can go anywhere you want once you've got your registration, or the only other place to go for a permit would be the mass gathering permit fee. So we need a new fee schedule item associated with what is Section 917 as opposed to 918, which is the private property mass gathering fee. What I would suggest is you can deal with mass gatherings on private property. Our hold is in what the permit referenced in 9197, the events on public property refers to. What do you think?
I think that we can certainly tackle the mass gathering on private property tonight. Does the Parks and Rec already charge people who come to a big event like that?
Are you asking if Recreation charges food trucks to enter parks?
For big events, if somebody wanted to, hold a big event on public property, is there some type of fee for that?
There, depending on what park and the size, but there would be a rental fee if it were, for the park, for the facility.
It's for the
Correct.
use of the facility.
Right.
Correct.
Venue.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And that's made clear as well in 9-199, which says that the town council is the permitting authority with regard to public events. So what's contemplated in the ordinance, events on public property, what's contemplated in the ordinance as drafted is that the sort of thing that we see when anybody comes to do an event license. They come to the town council 90 days before the event. They say, we want to do an event at Marina Park. The council decides whether that's appropriate and issues the permit associated with that event. The fee is not identified in the ordinance at this point, and there's nowhere on this fee schedule amendment resolution that would do that either. So we're going to have to come back and come up with the right fee for that type of event.
So, but we can deal with the other two tonight.
13A.
So 13A, I'm
you
going to
can
make.
deal with those two numbers tonight.
I'm going to make a motion that the annual permit fee for the mobile food trucks be $50, and the temporary mass gathering permit be the same as Narragansett, $250. Unless you're a nonprofit, it should be $150.
Do I hear a second?
Not yet.
All right. Do I hear any other motions?
I'd like to make a motion for 13A for the annual permit fee for mobile food trucks to be $50 and $50 for temporary mass gathering permits.
Second.
So moved. Discussion. There must be some discussion. What's the reason?
No, I think the reasoning is that, I care what Narragansett does, but I don't at the same time. They have their own other ways of making money, and I think they just see their place as being a little bit different than South Kingstown. The 50 and 50 for me is looking at it from a processing and paperwork kind of situation in making sure that we charge a reasonable fee and nothing exorbitant, because I don't think $250 is a reasonable fee in my opinion for a temporary mass gathering permit.
So my thinking on my original motion was that the permitting fee for the mobile food truck is fair and equitable to the existing businesses. The $50 for the mass gathering fee may not cover the costs involved in extra police patrols and that kind of stuff. So,
well, in some of those cases, they would have to get.
I think in some of those cases they may get. Yeah.
Again, it's a private property that we're talking about, so it's not necessarily the case that you'd have a police detail unless traffic into or out of the property was an issue.
So again, $250 may be too high, but I think $50 may not
I think
cover
it's
it.
too high because the mass gathering the temporary mass gathering permit on private property applies when there's food trucks involved, right? There's not generally a fee to enter those events. So this, again, I looked to Sons of Liberty, right? So if they expanded that and had 500 people in there for 2 hours at least, right? That $250 would be their burden. They're not charging you an admission fee to get onto that parking lot. I'm going to have to agree with $50. I think that's burdensome enough.
Yeah, and I'm more addressing the private property one.
That is private property.
Right, but I'm thinking of neighborhood, and if it were in my neighborhood and we had to call the police 3 or 4 times,
I think you already pay
Neighborhood
taxes.
associations. So let's take it to that level, right? So we've got a neighborhood association that decides they're going to have a block party and invite 6 food trucks, and they're going to have 700 people in this neighborhood association, right? So now they're going to have to come up with $250 as the neighborhood association to apply for the mass gathering.
I think Joe's agreeing with you on the 50, though.
You know,
I also want to point out that the newspaper gave up and left.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I'm good with the 50 and 50.
There was a second on that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
There is already a second.
I'll comment on this quickly. I strongly stand by an annual permit fee of $25 for mobile food trucks and $50 for temporary mass gathering permits. I don't believe we're relying on this for a source of revenue to the town. I think it's on us to encourage, this type of business in town. Sons of Liberty brings a lot of activity, and I think that, at Borderline is potentially 500 people within a 2-hour period of time, and if we charge them an amount, in excess of $50 for mass gatherings, that will discourage them, and they will not continue to do things of the like. I think $25 for a mobile food truck is reasonable. I don't think they should be on the same level as a restaurant, for example. As I mentioned before, there's disparity in the hours of operation. Potential to earn as much revenue is not even close. Restaurants are in a building operating 7 days a week. Mobile food trucks don't even have the option to operate up to the same amount of hours for the days that they do operate. So for that reason, I stand strongly behind permit fee of $25 for mobile food trucks and $50 for temporary mass gathering permits.
All right, Rory, thank you. I would actually side with Rory in this debate, but I don't know if we have the votes for that.
I think, so we
could be a motion to amend this?
I actually made the motion originally, right? So, the second motion, right?
Motion to amend.
You can withdraw your motion, Brian.
Yeah.
And your seconder can withdraw the second, and you can make a new one.
Personally, I think we should still stick at the 50 and 50, so.
You should move forward with a vote on the 50-50 and see where that goes.
Call the vote.
Yeah, we could also have an amendment, but I'll call the vote.
Can I offer an amendment to that, to the motion? That's
Without voting?
to 25 and 50.
You can.
I think I called the vote.
All right. So I will offer that amendment to go with 25 for the mobile food trucks and 50 for the temporary mass gathering.
Is Rory going to second that?
Second.
Seconding the amendment. Okay.
So moved.
Is anybody going to recognize that I called the vote?
The original vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I believe we were still in the process of debating the motion. So we have an amendment proposed. Discussion on the amendment.
I just think I get what Rory's saying. It's an annual fee of $50, and I just think that that's more reasonable.
But these food trucks have to pay it in every town they go in. So if they're here today in South Kingstown, and tomorrow they go to Charlestown, and the next day they go to Westerly, and the next day they're in North Kingstown,
But
it becomes burdensome.
It's burdensome, but they're also mobile, and in my opinion, have less expenses than having a place that they're paying. That's just my opinion. But we can call the vote. I mean,
So you're clear, you're only voting on the amendment right now?
Yes.
Restate the amendment, please.
The amendment is to move the mobile food truck fee to 25 from 50. Any other comments on this? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay.
Nay.
That motion carries by 3-2. Now the motion on the floor is for $25 for the mobile food truck fee and $50 for the temporary mass gathering permits. Discussion on that. All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right. By a vote of 3-2, that motion carries. 13B, a resolution establishing the maximum number of municipal mobile food establishment permits that may be issued at blank, in accordance with the Town Code, Chapter 9, Licenses and Miscellaneous Business Regulations, Section 9-192, number of permits granted.
So the reason this is in front of you is the state allows you to choose a number. They figured they're going to give you some local control over whether you want to have 50, 10, or no limit. And I will tell you, it's all over the place. Sue just advised me Narragansett, it's 12. 2 of the other towns I happen to work for, they don't have a limit. So this is, once again, a policy decision. But the law requires that you decide it one way or the other.
You can do that. Let's see how quickly, though.
Whatever we decide tonight, we can amend at a later date to include more.
Anybody want to throw a number out there?
10.
10.
I don't want to see a cap.
We have to have some number, unfortunately.
You can have, not have to.
Oh, you can have unlimited.
You have the option of keeping it unlimited. If that is the case, you have to state that.
Can we, if we were to say 10 and there was something that's going to be more substantial than that, they could apply for special use? No?
No, they'd come back to you and ask you to raise the cap.
Okay.
So here's the problem with 10. 10 at any one event sounds great, but you have the same 10 at any event in town. I don't know. I don't think that's right. That we are, in the state of Rhode Island, we're limiting 10 vendors to come in here. Only 10.
That's a lot of food trucks.
I'll support unlimited.
I see 2 people.
So if it becomes an issue, then we could put a cap on it. Let's say I guess what I'm just thinking about is just trying to think of a property big enough that you could have an enormous amount of food trucks and traffic issues and things like that.
Just raise the permit fee.
Right, there you go.
Within the ordinance, there was a lot of language that spoke to parking and the ability to move vehicles, emergency vehicles around. So that's going to limit, no one's going to have 100 food trucks in a parking lot that only has 100 spaces, because they're not going to be able to do it. They're not going to get the temporary, whatever it is, mass gathering or whatever we're granting for these things, right?
Yep.
So I just feel like 10 permits, we will see the same 10 hot dog trucks for the next year.
No, I understand what you're saying regarding that.
I'm a free market guy. Just let me know when we're going to follow Robert's rules again.
All right. I hear a lot of consensus around unlimited right now.
So my only suggestion on unlimited is it may be easier to simply maintain the number and then modify it over time. So 99 or 250, or give it some high number so that you can adjust the number without sort of having to change your whole approach to it.
So what is the number then?
25?
99.
99?
100.
100.
Do I hear 250?
All right. Somebody just make a motion. Those numbers.
I'll make a motion that we establish the maximum number of municipal mobile food establishment permits that may be issued at 100 in accordance with the Town Code, Chapter 9, Licenses and Miscellaneous Business Regulations, Section 9-192, number of permits granted.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. That motion carries and brings us to C. Resolution continued from November 25th, 2019, directing the town manager to inform Cox Communication that the town does not intend to continue live broadcasts of the town council meetings and will instead rely on the broadcast of recorded meetings. This is described in a memo from the town manager to the town council on November 20th. I believe the town manager asked that we table this motion, so I would entertain that motion.
I'll make a motion that we table this motion to a future meeting.
13C.
So moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed?
Yeah, well, I don't think that's exactly what he asked for, but aye.
Well,
We're beyond discussion.
yeah. Once it's on the table, it stays there. All right. That motion carries. E, a resolution authorizing an award of contract to Comstar LLC, 8 Turcotte Memorial Drive, Rowley, Massachusetts, for emergency medical billing services at a cost of 4% of all collections, including ESO Solution, EPCR software, and further authorizing the finance director to contract for services involving accounts in collections, and as further described in a memo from the director of EMS to the town manager.
Can I ask a question regarding this? How I read that is that for 4% of collections, they're going to also include the software?
That's correct.
Okay. And maintenance of the software, I'm assuming, on top of it.
The answer is yes, although I don't know that the maintenance agreement would cover, all updates or that kind of thing. I think it might make sense to call the chief up.
Yeah, it covers the entire maintenance. It's a turnkey. They cover everything. And we don't, they actually own it. We use it, so we're not liable for anything. For us to purchase it outright, it would be $10,000, then about $10,000 a year license fees. So this was the more cost-effective.
And who's entering that information into the system? We are?
Yeah, paramedics will enter the system.
Okay.
It'll be within one system. And this company has accessed health portal into the hospitals. So it's a seamless point. So we can get billing quicker and more accurate information.
Sounds like a good plan.
Thank you, Craig. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve 13E.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And F is a resolution authorizing the town clerk to advertise for order of notice a public informational hearing relative to a proposed land swap by South County Hospital of a parcel of land approximately 35 acres located at 494 Glen Rock Road and designated as a portion of Plat 4-1, Lot 1, in exchange for 8.1 acres of town recreation property known as Town Farm Park, designated as Plat 64-1, Lot 1, and further authorizing a 30-day public comment period to begin on Friday, December 13th, 2019, relative to this land swap proposal. Further authorizing submittal of a request to the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management for consideration and approval of said proposed land swap. Further described in a memo from the Leisure Services Director to the town manager dated December 5th, 2019.
Mr. President, as noted earlier, the one thing that we would ask here is that after you'll find the December 13th, 2019 date, December 13th, 2019, relative to this land swap proposal, that semicolon should be stricken, and further authorizing should be stricken and replaced with possible submittal of a request. We just don't want anyone to think that you are authorizing tonight the submission of that proposal. And that is a possible reading of that paragraph.
Thank you, Rob. If I may, there's just one other item in that sentence with the possible submittal to Rhode Island DEM for consideration to strike the words "and approval," because DEM does not have authority to approve. If, just for clarity's sake, I would propose that if that's okay.
All right, any other questions? Somebody want to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to approve agenda item 13F with the change as amended by the town manager and the director of leisure services.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. And that brings us to the end of tonight's agenda, our public agenda. We will now...
I'd like to make a motion that we move into closed executive session pursuant to RIGL 42-6-5A1 to discuss matters pertaining to personnel relative to the appointment of a director of planning.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye. The public minutes need to state that the individuals under discussion have been given written notice of they are being discussed in executive session.
Thank you.